If you'd all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And before we move on to our board calendar, I would just like to welcome Jaden to his first official meeting. And in true student fashion, Michaela left him here on his own for his first meeting. So Jaden, this is a board work session, so I just want to encourage you to chime in with your thoughts and ideas as we have open discussion on the topics that we're covering today. All right. So board calendar, just a quick check with everyone to see if there's any conflicts or any changes that we need to make to that. I think we're all moving. And we're going to jump right in with Brittany, I guess Brittany first.
Yes.
Providing survey results from the bond survey.
So I did a comparison from the one that was, that we did in May, and then the one that we did this last month. Is this? Okay.
Probably slide the on button on the side, I think.
Okay, so the first one that we did, we received 313 responses, and we sent that via Parent Square and social media. And then the August one, we sent it out on social media, we put it on Parent Square, and then it was on the back of the annual report. And we did not receive as much response, and my guess is that it's back to school time, people are stretched thin. But the responses that we did get were a lot more from just the community and not so much people that have like a stake directly in the school district.
I actually got a comment about that. You texted me that said it was hard. A lot of people didn't see the survey, that if you didn't know that you were looking for it, you wouldn't have seen it, because it was on the back page or something. I was looking at this up to see exactly what they said, but I can talk to you about it afterwards.
Okay. Yeah, we put it on the back as a QR code. But I can see how that might be if you didn't really look through it. Anyways, the majority of response was from community members this time, and then there's also, that's the May responses. Most of the previous one was parent guardian, and then this time was mostly a community member. The ages, we got a lot more of that 65 plus range, but still the 35 to 49 dominated. And then people who had it was kind of a mixed bag still, but still the people that had been here for a while responded more. Most people were aware of the February bond still.
So, sorry, just kind of some observations because I love data. So, what I thought was interesting about this slide in both scenarios is that the people who were here between 1 and 10 years, and that it's been longer than that since we've done any kind of investment in our buildings. And so I thought it was fascinating that, you know, these people that are sharing their opinions about how we invest in our schools haven't really been here since the last investment. And so I think maybe they're coming from a different perspective than folks who've been here quite a bit longer than that. So,
Yeah.
anyway, just an observation.
Definitely. So yeah, most people were aware. And then this was the second time around, we got more of people that voted no that responded to this. Again, April, it's a similar thing. Most people voted no that responded to this survey, and the one in August.
But that was a different group of people, though.
Yeah.
So it wasn't the exact same people, so.
No, yeah.
Yep.
Similar, I think the people that responded obviously are the no people, so they're gonna think that they thought that the bond proposals for both time were too expensive. And I think that this question, I don't think people really thought that the elementary school looked too expensive, because it's a mixed bag. But most people don't, it seems that most people don't think it looked too expensive looking. This was interesting that for May, most people would support the rebuilding OPS, and for August, most people would support the addition to Ording High School.
Yeah.
This one, again, addressing overcrowding was the one that people wanted or care about the most. This one, I couldn't get, these were longer responses, but for May and for August, building plan should minimize the tax increase as much as possible was the #1 answer. And then the second, for May, it was building plan should limit the need for portable classrooms. And for August, the #2 was ensuring the community has ample time to provide input and learn about the building plan before the bond is presented to voters. This was interesting too, that most people, I think our families obviously will look at their email more because they're getting information from there. And then our community looks for more the mailed reports. Most people are not interested in being a part of our CPAC committee. And not interested in reviewing our meetings. Actually, most people are not interested. This was the comments that I saw the most. I put dots because there was a lot of, it's kind of repeating themselves, but I think a lot of our retired folks responded, and so they wanted the senior community to be informed better. They addressing traffic concerns, only running the bond one time, and there was quite a few people from I think it's the Trilogy neighborhood up into Holly that responded. And then you can find all that data in the Google Sheets.
Didn't I see a comment that was, we needed more from Tahali? Because I was thinking I saw a comment in there, because we need that tax revenue to come in compared to the city. Wasn't there a comment in there on that?
I saw that comment too.
Yeah, I was kind of like, when I
something
read
about-
that, I was
yeah.
like, okay, so you're wanting more of out of the valley to, more focus on them.
Yeah, I think there was something last time where they wanted more community feeling, like they feel like they're kind of out of it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
for them.
yeah, that's what it was, is that people feel like there's, like Bonnie Lake, like people want to be part of Bonnie Lake, but when they're part of Ording, they kind of feel like it's not as good, I think is the vibe, that people were saying. But from this response, a lot of the Trilogy people were saying leave us alone, we should be part of the Bonnie Lake area.
I thought it was interesting, there was one comment in there that, it was almost like, how dare you include the Trilogy community in your district, and you know better, shame on you for doing this, and I'm like, we didn't do this.
We did
But
this
just
on
that
purpose.
level of that understanding is
Yeah.
not there for a lot of folks, so
Yeah.
yeah, we did this on purpose by including them.
Yeah, we're in charge of it, I don't know. Anyways,
To your point, Mike, I found that comment, it was, in not the.
It's in the next one,
It's in
isn't
the,
it?
yeah, so, but it does talk about status symbols and as a family in Bonnie Lake, but Ording School District. We have many families in the area that are still fighting to be included in Bonnie Lake instead of embracing Ording and helping build a better future for their kids. So to focus energy on education on the bond for families located outside of Ording city limits, but still within the school district. loved being able to see the compilation of all those survey points that you did, and you did a great job of putting it down in the graphics that are easy for me to understand. So I appreciate that, and I wish we had more of, got more feedback from the most recent one, but I thought it was interesting, the different community group that participated in that percentage-wise versus the first one. I thought that was kind of interesting.
I think the first one was more fresh in their minds,
Yeah,
you know, and it was kind of like the end of the school year, like people were like, you know, it
yeah.
was fresh, they were ready to talk about it, it was hot. Whereas I think now, like, you know, people are getting ready to send their kids back. You know, there's school supply shopping, they're doing all this, they're stretched thin, and so asking to do another survey, I think maybe was just like one thing too much for us to ask, I don't know. But the community member was like, we can answer this real quick.
Yeah. Good point.
The interesting thing, I think, about the data point is a school needs a supermajority of the aggregate participation base in that election to pass. And I think you see what the voice of families and parents are, but when we look at the average age of the two elections, they were 58 and 60 respectively. So of who generally participated at the majority level, you can kind of see where their interests lie. And there's a dichotomy. So as we're talking tonight and thinking about how to shape a package, part of that interesting philosophy is like, who are we building that for and how do we engage them and get the right package and the right support? Because there's dichotomy of thinking about what's important and why and rationale and worries about tax rates. So I'm looking forward to tonight's conversation and thinking about how do we really engage, whatever we put forward, how do we engage and tell the story to maximize our chances at the polls in February, presuming you decide to go out in February.
When we're talking about engagement too, has there been a lot of discussion or thought yet on how to meet that need? The one thing that still comes up that quite honestly blows my mind, because I feel like we were having events at least once a month, if not more, to get the input from the community, and yet the community is still asking for those opportunities. Has there been a lot of discussion and thought like into how do we do more and ask more of everybody who's always there to get these opportunities? How do we do that?
Good question. I'll say kind of. So we know that some folks, the first time they saw information about the bond is when we had an ask. And so to really get out in front of that, we decided to send more regular newsletters. So we will have something go out in October, and we'll have something go out in the springtime, near the end of the year, maybe after the kids graduate, so we can tell some of those stories. So I think that'll help to spur some communication, but what was different last year is really came down to late October, early November when we had a package decided, because we were still doing that work in CFAC. So depending on when you have a decision or an idea of where you want to go, I think it's possible to start that outreach a little bit sooner, because we really much communication until right after Christmas, because we thought after you pass that third week in November, those couple weeks are really busy and slammed. And so we felt like to really capitalize on the market, we started the outreach right after break. Conceptually, we could start that a little bit sooner. We could start to foreshadow some conversation in October, early November about what's happening and what are some of these issues looking like, sounding like, how have we responded, and then start to put some information about the package you decide in November. So we think we can get out in front of it a little bit sooner. But if you remember how many things we did between then and February, it was at least a page worth of outreach opportunities. And we still saw confusion, we still saw misunderstanding about what's part of the district and what's the tax rate and is the bond paid off. And that existed after the second bond. So I'm not quite sure exactly how we're going to rectify some of that, because I thought the communication was on point and it still missed its mark in some circles. But I think we can start sooner this year, I guess, is what I'm hopeful about.
I think one of the patterns I saw through both surveys is that like only 5 people said they'd be willing to participate in a meeting. Like nobody wants to have to do anything. Don't make me volunteer for CFAC. Don't make me go to an event. And serve it up to me in paper, and if I work for the school, email's good. But don't make me go do anything to get the information, so that's why I'm gonna be advocating for small bites of information mailed to their houses. If it doesn't get served up in their hands at the kitchen table, then they're not gonna digest it. And that's costly for us, doing the mailing is expensive, so I don't say that casually. But I think that's the only way people are going to feel informed.
The other thing,
Newsprint.
I mentioned this to Ed, I think whenever we hear things, like I was thinking about last year when all the parents came in about lunch lines and how much time they have for lunch, connecting all those things to, yes, we understand this is an issue, we are overcrowded and this creates a difficulty. And so always connecting them to our reality, and that long-term fixes for it are really only building. I mean, and not to slam it over their head, but to remind them, well, a lot of these things that you're not happy about are because of our present situation. And yes, we'll work to do our best with what we have, but it's really not gonna get better.
I felt like one of the comments also were, we needed to down the doom and gloom, right? That things are bad. And,
Damn it.
the gym's falling apart, or we're going to take things away type thing, because we
They
don't
didn't
have,
You're saying they didn't,
that was one of the comments that I thought was in there.
because I heard mostly comments about we didn't do enough of telling how it.
How bad
How
it
bad
is,
it
right?
is.
Yeah, that's what I'm
Yeah.
saying.
Oh,
That was
okay,
the
I
comment
okay, yeah.
was, we didn't use that to an advantage.
Right, yeah, that's what I heard that.
To a point, but, so much of the time, right, if I'm just gonna sit here and nitpick something apart and say,
Yeah.
it's bad, right? Then people tend to tune that out too, right? Because they're like, hey, I don't wanna hear that, right?
I honestly though, I made a note to myself when I was helping do the rooms just a week or two ago. I just wanted to take pictures, honestly, and put them up as to what they are dealing with. Pictures of the floor, pictures of the holes in the window and the ceiling and these are teachers trying to decorate their classrooms with all of this. And I do really believe that we have to be more real on, look at this, is this what you want for Ording students? Because right now, this is our reality. This is what our teachers deal with. This is what our kids deal with. And it's not trying to scare them or be mean, it's just the truth.
So that's
And-
one of the things when we did the tour of the facilities
Yes.
at the very beginning of the
Yes.
CFAP process, right? There are things that most people don't get to see unless you are working in the bus barn or you're teaching at OPS, OES, that you just don't realize, or we've had a heavy rain and it's flooding in the middle of that campus, right? And you can't, inside,
Right.
So how do we get that visualization? Because you're not gonna get everybody to go tour,
Right.
the building and see those things. So how
I'm
can
thinking to
we?
take pictures and put it on the website, or put it out there. This is a typical classroom. Look at what they're, this is what it looks like at our cafeteria at lunch, because
Right.
it's,
Yeah.
so crowded. Be specific and put things out there because I do know that the teachers it was hard for them, it's like, we're coming into this classroom and trying to make it look good, and it's hard to make it look good, to be honest, and I think that if we really start showing some of those things, I couldn't hurt, because it's the truth. We're not just saying things, we're showing them what's the reality is.
And I know you were at Ptarmigan too. I spoke to my wife about it a little bit, and I said, so the lunchroom, right, where put up the divider and they got
Yeah.
PE going
Yeah.
on one side and the kids are, and she goes, yeah, what happens is we funnel them in and we're like, hurry up and eat as
Yes.
fast as you can eat,
Yes.
and then out of here, because I got more coming in.
Exactly.
If somehow, right, and I think we're trying, and I believe that it was probably out there, but videos of this, right, that are out there that they get to see, hey, this is how it's going on at PTR,
Yes.
right? There's a reason we're needing to build a bigger gym there to accommodate these things, and the community needs to see that stuff. And yeah, I mean, you know, almost social media, it's gotta get blasted out there on it, because that's where they're gonna see it.
And that's our key way of social media for our seniors, because a lot of our seniors, some seniors, yes, definitely do social media, but a lot of them don't. So I think we have to become good friends with the senior center. They have lunches, they have an average of maybe 60 people there at a time. And we need to be over there, talking to them, explaining to them what's going on. And, you know, just, we need to use that so that we're hitting a good majority of the senior citizens.
Do you think, sorry,
Oh, no, so I'm agreeing with you both, and I think there's a good portion of our community that doesn't resonate with. They're not in the schools, they'll see the videos and they don't understand that this is really bad, and if we had another building, that this would be better. I think they're worried about the tax dollars, we've heard that loud and clear through the surveys, and so that cost factor is gonna be most important to them. And I also heard classroom space, not athletics, not gyms. They want CTE so that the kids can get a job, that's a priority. And if I were to ask my parents who are of the same generation, that's what they would say was most important. And just classrooms, an elementary school, build an elementary school affordably, and those tax dollars, like the high school CTE stuff.
Yeah.
I think those two ideas would resonate with that broader community, but I think our stories of look how bad we have it, I think there's a lot of the community that's going, yeah, I freaking got a hole in my roof too, and I can't fix it, and you know, I'm trying to just pay my bills, and I don't have extra money, and so I want to be respectful of what that 11,000 person community is, knowing that our school community is only a fraction of that. And I don't, like looking at their survey, I don't think it's our school community that needs to be convinced of our pains.
Yeah.
They know it, they live it, they
Yeah.
see it, their kids deal with it, their middle school kids come home sweaty and stinky because it's so dang hot in the buildings. But I think that large,
That's the thing.
well, they don't know, and that's why
No,
I'm
they
saying
didn't
do
vote.
that. Oh, they didn't
Yeah,
vote,
so
yes.
that hurts us there.
There's that too,
Yeah.
yeah. So I think we need to put more of our pain out there. I had a community guy in my neighborhood, he's like, what do you mean the gym's falling down? It looks fine to me, show me pictures. And so I did, I showed him the pictures of the crumbling concrete, and he's like, oh yeah, you need more of that.
Yeah,
That's compelling
exactly,
information
yeah,
for me.
Yeah,
right,
yeah.
So I think it's a combination of, here's the bad stuff, this is the why. Knowing though that that's not gonna, some people are gonna go big deal. When I was in school, it was just as bad, I survived.
I don't know if there's anything we could do to convince those people, but,
And maybe not,
yeah.
maybe not. But the tax dollars, being considerate, and listening to that feedback and trying to get to a lower price point, I think that'll resonate. And then focusing just on classrooms,
I
going
think
through the
that
survey.
a lot of people still did not understand that the other bond was finished. Because
Yeah,
they have this
they didn't get that.
group of guys out at the High Cedars, and not one of them understood that. And, they just, and that's a huge thing. We were adding it too, and so I think that somehow we have to figure out how to make that clear. I don't,
We're kind of,
Yeah,
aren't we kind of like in a pickle at this point because that has paid off?
Mhm.
When
now-
you do
now
add
we
this,
have
it's
it
now we
going
are.
to go,
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and people are going to feel that pinch, so.
Yeah, now it's kind of.
We would love Architect Matt to share some just scenarios with you. Well, we will have, the October board work session is set aside just for facilities. And so based on tonight's conversation, your direction, we'll engage in future conversation about reshaping the what and how might we engage and what are the talking points. But we wanted to build some scenarios with you so you can compare and contrast not only the data from both of those sets, but remember how much certain things cost. We wouldn't recommend as a team, I don't think, I think we're all in agreement in our recommendation to you, we wouldn't recommend running the exact same package we pressure tested that and that didn't have community support. So we need to adjust something. And what are some of the somethings and what's the range of what you could get for a price point? We thought he would share and talk about some of that, and then we can maybe merge those ideas together between what's the feedback we're receiving from the community, what are the price points, and what does this start to get us to think about what might we put forward? And get some of your thoughts on that tonight to see if we can take some steps. So, Matt, you have the clicker. Would you kind of maybe remind us what some of these things were costing and what we could get for small to larger amounts?
You betcha. So up on the screen is a recap of kind of where we were last time. So we had the new elementary, and if you remember, we had been framing it as 600 to 700 students, which means we were going to design an additional 4 classrooms that could get you there if we could afford it, but we were saying we could definitely, we knew for certain we could do 600, so that's what that was based on. An addition at the high school and PTR addition, and PTR, if you remember, had 2 things. It had a gymnasium as well as additional classroom space to address the issue we were describing earlier. And then we had some other things that we had put in there as well, and you can see those with, we had to move some portables at the high school out of the way, wanted to dedicate some towards the debt of the previous property, and then the stadium turf. And then we had state matching funds. So what we did is we allocated a portion of the state matching funds. So I don't remember the exact number, but we were anticipating this is probably in the range to 50 to 60% of what we were anticipating for the total state matching funds. And so we said we're going to allocate some of that towards our project costs, which got us to the $150 million bond. And part of that, if you remember the conversation, was that it's very risky to allocate all of your state matching funds. And so we need to hold some of those back as a reserve, which is really important. So that's how we landed where we did. Any questions on this? Okay. So then this, we kind of brainstormed a little bit and put out 5 possible options. Some you will like more than others, but we wanted to kind of look at the full range of things here. So starting with option 1, this is looking at a smaller scope at the high school, so maybe in the range of half of what it was before, maybe half to 2/3, something like that, and then doing something smaller at PTR, potentially just a gym or classrooms, depending on how you want to structure that, doing something small at PTR, and then that would be in the range of the 50 million. So that's a big decrease from before, right? About 1/3 of what it was before. Another option 2, just do an elementary school. And so that's the new elementary, and we're just not focusing on anything else. And we're, option 3 ups that a little bit, puts it at about 100 million. Look at the new elementary school, and then a smaller high school addition again. So we would need to really be strategic to craft that to get those dollars to work. Option 4 is similar, it's same dollar price as 3, but it just sort of flip-flops. Do we spend some additional money after the elementary school on PTR instead? And you probably could get more than just the gym addition. We just have to kind of do the math a little bit, because if you remember, the PTR from before was around 22 million. And then the option 5 of 130 million is making a much smaller reduction. So it could be that you do the high school in a very similar, you spend about the same amount at the high school and you do nothing at PTR, or you do reduce the high school and still do something at PTR. So there's kind of mixing and matching that we can do there, but just wanted to kind of put some things down as some options, some of the assumptions that are baked in here. Of course, if you look at options 2 through 5, there's new elementary school in every single one of those. So just figuring we know that's a very big need. So if there's questions about that, I'm happy to dive in. We have not done like a detailed estimate looking at these options. I can kind of describe what I could imagine, would be there, but once you kind of have some discussion about it, think about it, you can then say, we want to dive in deeper into these kind of possible scenarios.
When you change up what our original plan was and all of those factors, scaling it back, does it also scale back the state match part?
It would change it, yes.
Okay.
So, quick reminder on the state match, there's two kind of categories of state matching funds you get. One is for what they call unhoused students. So the state has a ratio of square feet size of buildings per student, and then they use that to say, okay, you don't have very much permanent building square footage compared to the number of students, so we're gonna fund a certain amount of matching dollars towards that extra square footage or building area. The second way they do that is they do it based on the age of the building. So if it's over 30 years old, it's not been renovated, etc., and then you can either renovate it or modernize in the state's language, or you could tear it down and build something new, and they call them new and lieu. So those are your two ways. And for us, the original state matching fund was really based on unhoused students. Elementary, larger portion, high school, some. But so we would recalculate that and talk to OSPI based on that. But I think in most scenarios it would go down.
But they didn't, I guess I'm specifically thinking about the gym portion that we were talking about in that first
PTR.
one.
Or if at high school.
At the high school.
Yep.
So if we were to consider taking the gym specifically off, but I don't know based on your descriptions right there if those state match funds actually applied to that because.
They did, because
They
we would be
did.
tearing something down that had not been, had state-funded renovation for
Okay.
30 years because of the gym itself. So there is a chunk there.
Okay,
What about OES?
So
Is that
we're-
old enough?
It's old enough for sure. The problem is that the plan is to use it as high school space for a while until this next phase of work at the high school. So therefore, we're not gonna get matching funds until you demolish it.
Oh.
So
okay.
Take it
next,
down.
next bond, then you would get it.
Oh,
For now,
oh,
we
okay.
end up having to transfer it from elementary to high school, and so, so that's where we're not getting very much on the
The building.
tearing down or replacing old
Yeah,
buildings
we
until that
gotta
next step.
demo something
Yeah,
to get
you do.
more
You have-
state funds.
You have to either demo it or do a major remodel to it, and no one's expected to ever do a major remodel on OES, so that would be demolished.
So on that, the CTE and science additions, are we, where
So the.
where would those go, right?
Yeah, so the majority of your funding is unhoused students at the elementary level, because you would get it at the high school level if we were not gonna use OES for high school.
Okay.
Because that ends up being extra square footage, so you're not getting very much unhoused students at the high school, or maybe close to zero. I have to double check the exact things, but, so it's mostly elementary where you get your matching dollars.
So even though, because unhoused students is portables,
Yes, but it's not based on how many portables you have, it's based on how many students you have
correct?
compared to your building size.
But what about the ratio for unhoused students with the gym? Because the PE is a required class, K-12, and
So the
It's
state
an issue.
simplifies the way they calculate it by just lumping together
everything.
all building area is one thing. They don't calculate like, oh, this part's a gym, this is a classroom, et cetera, for the matching fund piece.
It's just, it's everything.
It's just
Okay.
how many total square feet, and if you have 75,000 square feet of an elementary school, then they say, well, that should be enough for this many students. And if you have more than that, then the delta is your unhoused students. So we will recalc. So the big picture is that with any of these, we go back, recalc a bit. I would expect it to go down some. It's still going to be a pretty healthy number, though. It's going to be a healthy number because your elementary unhoused students is still substantial.
Cool. Sorry, go ahead. Go.
Can you readdress why it's a good idea to hold back some of those funds when we get to the point where we're actually doing something? What's the reasoning behind holding that back?
The
Not-
reasoning is that all of us think we're pretty decent at predicting the future, but we're actually pretty poor at it. And it's important to just recognize that no matter how many years of experience we have trying to predict, we just can't get it right. And we do the best we can. So when we create budgets for you, we build in contingency there and try to build in the right amount, not too much, not too little, but you are very prudent to have some additional for, oh my gosh, I can't believe this thing happened. And most of the time, the oh my gosh, this thing happened does happen. And other school districts have really struggled in the past when they haven't had that extra little bit to deal with the oh my gosh moment.
And then it loses your trust with voters, and so it does come back to the district, and the perks are if you don't have to use those funds, then you can use them for furniture and some other maintenance requirements throughout the district as long as the terminology is general enough.
What was the, I guess, because we had 7 million is
Maybe
what you were
it's
saying.
6
How much
additional
was it?
cents.
Yeah, somewhere in the
I'm
additional
not sure if it was
6-ish,
quite
yeah.
14, but it was probably
Okay,
6.
about half of it?
Yeah,
Okay.
roughly,
Oh.
yeah. There was 5 or 6
11 to
more.
13.
Something like that,
Mhm.
yeah.
Okay.
And so, and we're still early with OSBI too, so sometimes that process adjusts slightly too, because the numbers adjust. So it's not just the.
Every year they change the
Exactly.
amount they pay, and it goes up a little bit each year, stuff like that, so. And the other piece that we would want to do is, as I say, when we originally created the numbers, we did the best we could to predict where we thought inflation was gonna go, stuff like that. But we would wanna then now say, okay, let's take another dive, look at it, and test exactly where we're at based on today's and where we think we'll be. If you said a February election, then we wanna plan for that schedule. And so that tweaks the numbers also.
Well, Mike mentioned that we need to demo something. Weren't we gonna demo the old gym?
Yes, we
Okay,
were gonna,
okay.
yes,
I
but
was
the
just,
old,
I was just clarifying,
the
yeah.
old gym.
55 old gym, not the 77
So,
old gym.
right.
Oh, no, I
Yes.
know that.
Yeah.
The gym that I'm actually
Old.
the only person that's older than
The
the gym.
55 gym though is currently not considered academic space for the district, so it doesn't count towards matching funds. The 77 gym does count towards matching funds.
Oh, wow.
So,
I
does that make
forgot
sense?
about that.
Because,
Yeah.
so,
I think the fact of the matter is, it's gonna be smaller than $7 million, which is still a drop in the pan from what we need to spend.
mhm.
Yeah,
So
the state's not much help.
the state is, I won't say no help, but they're awfully close.
I'm
But,
gonna
yeah,
make-
go ahead.
after you've done a reminder, I'll start. So what we just shared through 2 different avenues are the quantitative data, percents and numbers and such, but as we engage in conversation about what should go on the measure and why, I would encourage you to think about the qualitative data, the conversations, the listen and learn, the feedback that you received, the 1.5 years of CFAC research, the 88 people that went into steering and giving you advice of feedback of here's what we think the priorities are and why. So as we take all of those things into account and think about what really should go on the next package and why, all of that information for the last couple of years, I would hope is surfacing somewhere in your brain as you as a team try to make that best decision for what's the right next step. We don't think it should be exactly what we did before, because that didn't work, but what should it be? That's the basis of, I think, the employee or the strategy that you had of a roundtable conversation, to put those on the table, and what's the first tier of priority, and why would that be, and what's the next tier? So I wanted to share that reminder with just some new data points, because you don't know this yet. Ptarmigan Ridge crested above 700 as we started the year. We were planning for about 660 students, and right now we're a little over 710. We did take away the classroom at the stage at Ording Elementary, so music could be back on the stage, but we did increase sections there, and we're at 510. Mind you, that school is built for 200 and change. And then the high school, the aggregate head count is about 940. The real number of full-time students is about 850, 860, so that's up slightly over the previous year. And our forecast, if you remember what Director Slagle shared in June, show that 2 years from now, we're about 1,150 high school students. So this campus, we are max capacity, and the only place to add temporary capacity is in the main parking lot, or displacing our early learning program and giving ECAP the boot and building portable space out there. So I just want to remind of those data points as well, so that's fresh in your thinking. But I would encourage you to look beyond just this data set as well, because many of you have been in this journey from day one and have heard all those voices, and I think those need to be at the table as well.
I'm glad you mentioned that. So I was reflecting on all the work of CFAC and our meetings, and just the common thread has been new elementary school is being a priority. So for me, when I look at our options to choose one that doesn't have the elementary in it, would be kind of dismissing that consistent voice that we've heard asking for new elementary schools. So that's one.
I feel that way honestly about the CTE too, because
Yeah.
I have not talked to a person that does not appreciate that we've added all these
Yeah.
CTE.
Right.
And I can't stand the thought of not having our kids be able to have that. You know,
Yeah.
it's like, no, I'm sorry, but we need that. I mean, we need everything, but.
I share this with Ed, other thing we need to think of is, when we think of this plan, you have to realize that this is part of a longer term plan, and if we think, say, of not doing the auxiliary gym there, okay? Then when we have to go to the big gym, where are we gonna have the kids go to PE because there's no other gym? You know, so in the long term, some of these things are like pieces that play out in the long term plan. Additionally, I know they said no more, not sports, but another gym at Ptarmigan is not just another gym, it's a lunchroom, we don't have enough core facilities at Ptarmigan to deal with the number of students that we house there. So we have those students, but we don't have enough places for them to take the required PE class or to have lunch, or, or to make a schedule where they can all have those things. So I don't think that some of those things are understood by the people who are filling out the survey, and some of the things, I think we need to listen to them, but we also need to remember we have certain obligations too, and we have to make this work in the long run, because if we don't make it work in the long run, we're right where we are now, which is we've done patchwork things for years without a long-term plan, and we have things like all those kids at OES in that little teeny playground.
When we're talking about the dollars for these, I'm assuming these are just kind of rough estimates, but we talked about how if it didn't pass at the last one, it would definitely go up. So if we were to choose, for instance, a 100 million project, how close, even scaling back, are we going to get to the 150 that we tried before and didn't get? Like, we're going to get less for our dollar. How close are we going to get to that dollar ask where people were just?
Yeah, that is the math exercise we haven't done, but there's some conceptual thinking to that we could share. I think if you said you wanted to do one of these 100 million options, the likely scenario is that the elementary price is probably not gonna, it's not gonna be going down. And then you're looking at, let's say option 4, because we were just talking about PTR. Part of the reason that we didn't list gym addition and classrooms at PTR, which is what we had last time, is that I think you will have to scale back PTR to be able to afford doing something at both schools. So we shouldn't assume that we could, if you went to 110 or something, or maybe, I don't know, we'd have to play with what the exact number is. But just trying to cap it some easily conceptual numbers there, you're gonna have to do less at PTR than we originally planned in option 4, for example.
I'm not exactly sure that people, the majority of people are complaining about the cost of the bond. I haven't heard that. I hear them say, keep it as reasonable as you can, but I haven't heard them, that's why they would vote no, because it was too much. That's not what I've heard. I mean, I think that they want, yes, they don't want high tax dollars, they want us to be responsible, but, I mean, like, even when we asked them, did that look too nice? No, it didn't look too nice. It's like they want nice things. The people, we had yes votes more than no, so I'm not sure that the cost is gonna, I mean, you know, yeah, we'll look at something different, but I don't know for sure if the cost is the huge factor.
I mean, I don't think, according to the information we got back, maybe it's not the majority factor, but it does play into whether it's strongly agree or disagree or whatever it is. You know, there's still a majority of people that are thinking about their own personal ability to live life like they want to. And if their property taxes are going up, then that's going to, you know, limit some things at home. And I don't think that even though, you know, some voices that have taken time to talk to us, maybe that's not their bigger deal. The data that we saw from the survey results indicates that, yes, it is. It might not be majority because we did get over 50%, but we're still up against that supermajority problem. And I personally believe that if we just ignore that and go back for the same thing.
No, I didn't say go back.
No, but I
said
just.
That I don't think that's the number one factor.
Yeah.
I think the number one factor is we didn't have enough people vote, okay? And that's the whole key. How do we get them to vote? Because you know, that's what we have to figure out. I mean, yeah, definitely we don't want to just throw it back out again. But I don't, you know, when I'm looking at it, it's like, I don't feel good about going for like a small amount and then saying, well, we'll run another one, because nobody's gonna, when we run another one, they're gonna say, well, you just had one a little while ago. So with the bond that we passed this time is gonna be the bond that is gonna be what we're gonna have, I feel, for a long time. I don't see it like, oh yeah, we'll do another thing in a couple of years, you know. So I feel like we have to be really careful about not leaving too much out, because I don't know that when we're gonna have another opportunity to do this. That's just.
Appreciate Director Tracy about what you're saying is, I'm torn in the data, because I think the probably better way to appeal to the larger market and the 11,000 registered voters is to make it as reasonably affordable as possible, which means removing the high school and maybe the PTR section. But of the 55% yes vote and the market that has been speaking to you the loudest, I think not having a portion of the high school in there would potentially cost some support that we enjoyed the previous two. So that's the tear, I think. And the other piece, although the data said people weren't as concerned about a tax increase down the road, I've never seen a tax increase go over well when the school is trying to ask for something. So having that high school piece in phase 1, so the next time around it's a phase and not 2 phases,
Yeah.
worries me of trying to have that feel like a good idea 4 or 5, 3 years down the road. So I appreciate your message.
I remember the middle school and how many times that thing took to get passed that we were gonna build the middle school. And that was years upon, right? So, I mean, everyone's always slow to wanting to build schools. It's not a quick process. So if we can get one to pass, I agree with you, Tracy, on this one, that I'm not sure that we're gonna get another one, so, yeah.
The other thing is, remember, the thing that helped get OMS built was that what they added to it was the stadium.
Yeah.
So even though they say no
No, that-
athletics,
It's not true. Especially if you're I mean, you look at like wrestling, our gym is full because they win all the time. Look at lacrosse, our stands are full because they win all the time. So when you have a winning team, I can guarantee you, you're gonna have a lot of people out there, and they're gonna care.
So I might agree with you, except for the voter turnout. They didn't
Yeah.
come. They didn't come and vote.
No,
So-
I'm saying if we had a winning, I'm saying that,
But we do have a winning program with wrestling, and the wrestling gym was there.
well, I
They
don't know if they
specifically
do or
said
not.
they do not need a new gym.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so I mean,
They
The
did
comments
say
were
that.
specifically,
but
No.
I don't know if that was the wrestling families or not, you know, you don't know who
Yeah.
that was. But I know that the majority, I mean, because, I've been told that, you know, by quite a few people. You know, if you have good programs, you're gonna get people out, the community gets involved, everyone, and we've seen it many times, you know, so. That, I think that maybe, I mean, of course, it's not the number one priority, I wouldn't want it to be, you know, but it is a priority to a lot of people, I believe.
for sure.
I don't know, I just have a hard time giving this up. I don't like it.
I'd like to see us get the go-ahead to do something. I don't want to hear no. I want to see a new elementary school. I want the additions to the high school. And there is no question in my mind that PTR needs work, but I don't hear support in any of the comments and from the community. Nobody's worried, or nobody's talking about PTR. They're not passionate about new classrooms or a new gym maybe, but then they're like, it's a gym. You know, there's not a lot of emotion around that.
They're passionate about the crowded lunches, but they don't
Yes.
understand why they have the crowded
Yeah.
lunches.
But you know what too, that's our perspective. I was in Moses Lake over the weekend and they have 4 starting times for their high schoolers. 4. Some of their high schoolers don't start until I think it's 9:30, 9:50 in the morning, and they go until 6:30. So it's a matter of perspective, and we have a lot of new people in our community who maybe come from districts who operate in a different way to address that overcrowding. But I think the CTE classrooms at the high school speaks to the broader community of people, even outside of our school communities. And I think the elementary school is important to everybody inside the district. I just don't know, I don't feel that we're gonna win on a gym platform, no matter how badly we need it. And we got shut down on the stadium. We didn't just get a quiet no, we got shut down on a, you don't need to invest in athletics. I agree with you historically, absolutely, that will get people to show up, but I think it's a different time and place right now for our community.
I think there's been a culture shift with some of that stuff, and especially when you're looking at the report card of schools, when people just keep bringing up the
Yes.
academics and they want more focus on that. And I am definitely one, my kid played sports, and I know how important that was to her. And I know that without those sports, she would not be the leader that she is in her career today. And so I know how important that is. And as a mom and a grandparent of athletes, I know, and I'm with you on that. But in listening to everything, the stuff that I have heard and we've heard here, I'm in agreement that if we, that we just need to make the focus on, I'm personally a fan of option number 3. That's the one that speaks to me the most, because it does take into consideration the extreme growth problem we have. It houses all those students in a brand new elementary school. We get the CTE and hopefully some of that science edition at the high school for the students, and they need that more than parking. But it's just, it honors the people who did feel like we were putting too big of a plate out there with too many side dishes, or however you want to visualize that. It
I would
honors
like to
those
say to the people that are always complaining about our sports programs, last night, here's our field. This piece for girls' high school soccer, this piece for boys' football, this piece for, I think it was track. And then at 8 or 9 o'clock at night, you have the band. It's
Right.
like, how can you have good teams when you can't even practice on a full field? I mean,
It's-
that's what I want to say,
Yeah.
because I get a lot of I get a lot of people mad about our programs. It's like, you can't have good sports programs when you're trying to do a football, the football's going into the girls' soccer, you know. I guess I probably am not gonna have any friends over this, but I guess I'm tired of our kids always getting second best. It's like, you drive to Sumner, there's a brand new high school, you go up here, there's brand new things, it's like, why not Ording? Why can't we get that for our kids? Our kids are the same kids as all these other kids. And I'm tired of it, you know, and I don't know, I'm frustrated, of course, it sounds like that, but it's like, I hate the fact of always saying, well, you know, I guess we'll just have to cut it way down. It's like, I don't know, it's frustrating to me. Then parents talk, well, maybe I'll put my kid in Sumner or White River or whatever, and it's like, yeah, they can't. But it's like, I don't want that for our kids. I want our kids to have what all the other kids have around us. And I don't know how to do it. I mean, I honestly don't know how to do it because we tried and tried, but what I don't like about email is we can't talk.
Yeah.
It's like we send out our information, but we have no idea what they're thinking about it. It's like if we could just have some good conversations with people about what and why, I feel like we'd be more successful, but getting the people is the hard part. I don't know.
Well, I think it goes back to something Mike and I both said, and that is people understanding. So when they say, well, why are the girls, why are they not practicing until, you know, like, what did you say, 8?
Yeah.
Okay, then the coaches and the people need to say, because we don't have enough facilities, and as long as we don't have enough facilities, this is the way we have to do it. The same thing when people come in and say about, when they come in and they want to rent facilities for clubs or auditions or, you know, all the different things we're used for, say, well, you can only use this one here at this time because that's all we have. You know, I mean, start, and not say, you know, like, but I mean to say, just be matter of fact, well, you know, I'd like to give you a better time, but this is all we have because we are so crowded.
I just want to, I think pretty sure we all share your frustration.
Absolutely.
And I love your passion.
Yes.
Just to be clear, I'm not saying no to the gyms and the athletic facilities because I completely agree that it's been instrumental in so many of my family's, my life, my children's lives, our students' lives. I'm just saying for this next go round, let's do schools. And then it's on us to educate the community on how critical those facilities are, how they are learning rooms and spaces just as much as a classroom. And that would give us some time to do that. And to invite the community in, show them how all these spaces work, and that it's not just an empty gym most of the day, it's actually packed. And kids are learning there, so it's just a not yet for me on those things.
I just want to maybe make a public restate about where I think I'm hearing priorities and see if I'm capturing it okay, so we can just process check. I'm hearing that a new elementary, replacing Ording Elementary, is a priority. We could look to figure out how to minimize costs, so rather than, if you remember, bill it for 700, we could get it closer to that 600 student mark. If you remember, our projections for total elementary students dropped a little bit from where we thought we were going to be a year ago. So there's no way around a third elementary school somewhere by the 2030s, which we have land potentially set aside in Holly, and we could look to maybe not a turf field, but maybe it's grass or reduced scope, so we could look how to do that maybe a little bit more affordably. I'm hearing that OHS, CTE, or some classroom space at the high school is a priority. Less so on the athletics, and whether that is no auxiliary gym or main gym, we could work with our architect team to say what would just an essential first touch of career tech ed look like, and then maybe have some ideas and see where that pricing is. PTR or PTR gym, I've heard at least a couple of times that the gym element is a priority from the safety and health risk of serving kids food. We don't have enough space to adequately serve kids. By law, they're supposed to get 30 minutes of uninterrupted time. There's not enough time, so one of two things will happen. Either they won't get PE, or PE will be outside. It won't be in where we're serving food. So the gym was about $6 million, relatively not terribly expensive. But if you remember, we had 23 million for PTR because the vision was comparable to elementary schools from safety, security, furniture, ingress, egress, parking, and there's a lot of challenges that we have because it's well over capacity. So we could look at what a gym component would be or none. That would be an easy, here's what it is with or take away. But I heard the gym component at least a few times would be a priority. Catch me if I'm wrong on that. And then, of course, no stadium work. We've already done the turf, and for paint, for $8,000, we can paint the track lines and call that a day for some other time. And then no light upgrades at the stadium as well. So that's what I think I've heard with a few core priorities, but I wanted to say that out loud and see if I'm off base or on base so far.
I don't know if people understand the PTR gym.
Mhm.
What?
I don't think the PTR gym, I think it's a very small group of people who understand the PTR gym. I don't think the community, that's not gonna
They don't
resonate
have-
with
no,
them,
They don't.
no.
Like I say, I asked my wife, and she was there, and I was like, what's this all about? She just laid it out. I'm like, well, that's crazy.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Oh,
You're
yeah.
right.
Not just
Hurry up, cram a bunch of food in your face and then get out of
Well,
here.
not
Yeah.
as
Right?
just do
And I'm
that
like,
with
man.
food, it causes way more behaviors.
Right.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah.
it's
Yeah.
like-
I'm not disagreeing, you don't have to
Yeah.
convince me.
We,
I'm just saying that the
Yeah.
broader, that 11,000 voter group is maybe not gonna be able to wrap their minds around that.
I'm curious if you said, we're gonna expand the cafeteria at PTR,
Instead of calling it a gym.
would that change the conversation?
And connect it
Because-
to the classrooms. It's the
Hey.
bridgeway to classrooms.
Is that where it's supposed to go?
Well, no, I wasn't suggesting building classrooms, but just reframing it to say, the only reason we're building a gym is because we don't have enough cafeteria space.
Right.
Right.
yes.
It's because we have 700 students, we don't have enough cafeteria, and so we're
My mind
expanding,
is
we're expanding the
instructional.
cafeteria
Yes.
through this gym. Now, you have to be a little careful,
Can it
I
be
mean, you have to be
said?
truthful.
Yeah, I wanna be
You
truthful
have
and
to
I
be
don't
truthful,
wanna,
It is true.
I do.
I think that's an interesting idea, for sure.
yeah.
I mean, I'm looking at the conversation as maybe a bigger level, and I do think that once you say that you're touching a spot, so you're touching PTR, that gets messy for the next bond. So I just caution doing something, I think there's a great way to add some scope there that maybe would help day to day. But I do think that the impact that people have is kind of a nuance, right? The overcrowding for PTR, it's a little bit of a detail that not everybody hears or sees or understands. And so I think the vote that you get for PTR would be a little bit smaller than an overall, hey, we're just not touching PTR. It's an issue, right? And then it's cleaner for the next vote. And I'm just looking at a higher level to try to pass the bond. I am not minimizing the challenges at PTR, I'm gonna be clear. But I do think sometimes I've seen districts get in trouble a little bit and say, hey, I thought you touched PTR already. Like, why are you asking now again for our money? And it is such a, I don't say small, but it's a, you know, when you're there, you see it, but you have to have a kid there or really understand it, that it's a problem.
The other point to that too, and kind of looking at that, is that if we were to put, even if it was a reduced project at PTR, at first glance, with nobody really looking into it, they're gonna see the same three things
Yeah.
that we had already
Yeah.
asked for.
That's a
And
good point,
and-
yep.
I think it will be hard to disseminate that information. People are still going to look at the high school, and it's going to take some explanation to tell them, notice there's no gym, if we were to go that route,
Right.
right?
Yeah,
Notice there's no gym,
exactly.
it's just learning space only, even though the gym's learning space, that's a whole other conversation. But I think if we were to even try to reduce that scope of PTR, that people are just going to,
Say that you didn't.
yeah, we didn't make any changes, we're still asking for the same thing. And maybe just trying to give crappier finishes to
Mhm.
reduce the cost, or, you know, just, I don't,
Yeah, I think you're right.
I mean, and the high school's getting an addition in the second bond or the third bond down, right? So at the same time, the gym can be added probably to that one at that time.
A couple things that you haven't discussed that I want to throw out to just see where that might sit a little bit. If you remember the first survey, the data, the second issue beyond overcrowding, so this is where the majority of feedback came from, was around safety and security, because we did discuss in that bond keyless access controls, keyless cameras, other measures to improve safety. And then the third issue that resonated the most, probably because it was May and it was sweltering in every school, was HVAC upgrades. And we had in the first bond, HVAC improvements at PTR, air conditioning, heating and cooling. And then we thought we'd be able to make that happen at OMS for a relatively small price point as well. I don't know where those sit, but I wanted to bring that up to see, we could look at what a base would be and then some adds to, or what a bare bones would be, or leave that off. I just wanted to surface that because a majority of the respondents, at least on survey 1, 2/3 approximately, said those issues were of concern, which if they talked to the kiddos in May when it was 85 degrees, yes, it was unbearable. And those issues could be addressed, but not without bond funding. We don't ever have enough capital projects money or facilities money to address those without that going into the bond.
Well, to me, because I've lived it, it's a priority, because when your classroom is like 90 degrees and the kids they won't even work. You can't even expect them to work. And we got this huge fan blowing where you can't hear anything. I mean, if you've lived in that, it's terrible, and we seem to be, we're warmer now, and so it's for a longer period. I mean, like, it's May, it's all of, most of June, and then even September is warm, so I don't know, I would hate to take that off.
And I say that because all those things won't happen for $100 million. They're going to be more than that, and so you may steer us towards 100 million, and we just do our best to bring the best recommendation of what we can fit that aligns, or you might say, what would 100 and 130 look like, and let's take 50 off the table, and then bring a couple ideas back to you. We can, however you're most comfortable. But I just wanted to throw that out there, remind you that a vast majority of the survey in aggregate data had those two issues on their mind.
Can we know, estimate, obviously, what the HVAC's going to bring to it? I mean, we can look at the 100 million, but if it's 5 more million, or, right, whatever that number is, that way we know, right?
Yes, I believe we can get that out close.
I mean, I look at it and I'm like, okay, so 150 and we want to reduce, right? And I don't know that the 100's like the mark, right? Ooh, if we hit 100, we're going to get this passed, right?
Right.
So I look at it in that side of it and I'm like, so it's 110 or 105 or 108 million, right? But if we're upgrading the HVAC system, because we know that's an issue on that side of it, and we're doing it in all the schools at that point, maybe that's an option that comes in on that, right?
There's a comment in the survey data that the turf, and this was the only place I saw that comment, so I want to qualify with that. But like things like turf, that's maintenance, that we should just figure out how to budget for that. Do you think that the HVAC is part of that? Should that just be maintenance that we figure out?
Not an upgrade on it.
Yeah, we don't have
I mean, if we had AC already in the
Right,
schools,
yeah.
then
Yeah.
I would say that
Yeah.
would be part of maintenance. But when you don't have it, you need to come in with a chiller and,
Yeah.
you've got to put this in, and we don't have them.
So
And people don't realize that. They don't realize that there isn't, unless you're in a portable.
We're
That's
really,
an argument for portables.
What?
It's actually an argument for portables.
Right, no, I understand that, and that's why it's so weird, they say, no portables, well, that does have.
Those are the cool rooms.
did we just, in our previous bond proposals, did we just discuss at a level up here about HVAC and security, or was that?
we had that embedded in
It was embedded in-
PTR,
yeah.
and what we were discussing internally is that we reasonably believed if bids came in well, and at that expected price point, we'd be able to tackle that at Ording Middle
Right.
School.
Okay.
We
Yeah.
didn't commit in the language to a firm improvement at Ording Middle.
And that's another one, right? right? Because I know with the super portable and whatnot that's at Ptarmigan, safety is a concern on that,
Yeah.
because it's not, how do you lock that building down,
Right.
right?
Super portable isn't that super. It's pretty small, those classrooms are tiny.
But, you know, that side of it, you know, reality is, we need these safeties, you know, implemented in to protect these children. And I think, right, most people, they like the safety side of that. You know, the feedback we're getting, they're gonna be on board with safety. I know, we're driving the cost up.
That's,
But we've waited so long to do anything, we have so many needs,
I
it's
know.
really hard
It's
to
hard.
know,
Draw the line.
you know, what,
Safety came in higher than heating and cooling in both surveys.
so, and the second survey, heating and cooling was much lower.
Yeah.
Well, you could get heat exhaustion.
But
That is safe.
I think we had more staff and families responded in May, well, I know we did, and they were hearing the
Yeah.
street data conversation about how unbearable it was
Yeah,
at that time.
yeah.
If I did the math right, the second survey was about 8% of your total respondents, if I did the math right.
Of course, you know, I'm kind of leaning more towards the 130, but just because I don't see how we can do what we need to do with, I don't know,
I think that's where we need to be. I think it's gotta be closer to 100 for people to feel like they've been heard.
that's 20 million off, isn't it?
It's not, yeah. If we could be like 99 million, that'd be perfect.
99, even if you get 99.9.
99.9.
I think we have to get to the $100 or to the 100 million.
Will we be able to do what we need to do?
No, what we need to do is all of the above.
Well, I know, but I
Yeah.
mean, even like the worst thing that could happen is to pass a bond and then not have things done that really need to be done. To me, in my.
The worst thing is we don't pass the bond.
Yeah, the worst thing is we don't even get the new elementary school because we keep,
I don't know that $30 million would make that difference. I don't know.
I think it would make a huge difference.
Looked at, it didn't change substantively our estimate of the bottom line per month. If you remember, we looked at what it would be like with no PTR whatsoever,
Right.
and our calculations were about $8 a month. And so at that point, for bond number 2, you decided, well, for $8 a month, that's de minimis, let's have that in. It's not worth the sacrifice at this point in time. However, if you show not listening to the voters, you probably are gonna have people in Bolton say, what are you doing this again? We already told you no twice, and exacerbating that unless the groundswell comes from within.
And I
Well,
don't think we can count on that.
Do you
Well,
think-
it didn't work last time.
Yeah.
Do you think that like by taking the gym off, that's what they're telling us, they don't want the gym, they don't, so if we're doing those things, it's still, it's showing that we are listening, you know, we're listening. I don't know.
I guess one of the challenges in my mind to that point is sort of, I think, what was the conversation earlier in terms of not all your voters are diving into the detail. And so then they have to see from a big picture perspective that you've made changes. And so that's harder to communicate, as we just said, if you're still doing work at all through schools. It doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, but I think that you just have to think through, okay, how do we get that, quick look to say, yes, you all listened to us, made changes, and it's crystal clear to me. And that's just a challenge that we have to sort of.
Because if we did
I'll use
the
the word
cooling,
impression, because it's not even a quick look, it's the impression somewhat, because
Yeah.
people do look at it so quickly,
They do.
so it's just what they feel in that immediate kind of a more emotional gut reaction, if they either did listen or they didn't. And make that
I think the
decision
clear
pretty quickly.
message of we're investing in classrooms, whether that's OES at the high school or improvements to safety in the classrooms, or if we can afford it, improvements to the heating and cooling in the classrooms. but it's an investment in our classroom learning environments. I think that would make sense for people. I think 100 million is the top end that we could ask for. The other thing we haven't talked about, and it just keeps coming up, is running this with a general election so that the voter count is not so flipping close. So that's
But aren't
another
we a
thing.
year away from
Yes.
November? It would be a whole year from November.
It would be a
right?
whole
Yeah.
year, and doesn't that present another bit of problem too? If you then try to run something after that, doesn't it take like a percentage of the voters from the last election or something like that to validate?
Yeah, there's
Correct.
risk.
I have heard from people that we would be better off to run it during the.
Yeah, that's surfaced a
But
few times.
I don't,
Outside of the 2020 election, that has not proven true. The
Okay.
data going back 30 years that Trevor showed is November is the third best time. February is the first, April's the second, November the third. The presumption in our area, 80 to 84%, it's one of those numbers of school bonds that ran November 2020 past that year, is because the heavy swing of Democratic votes, which tend to favor tax increases. So across the state, that was an anomaly, but historically, that doesn't prove true. February is the best, with April being number 2. August has always been the worst. But you get 2 shots in calendar year 2024, so that's February, April, back-to-back didn't work last time, so our thought was, if unsuccessful, February, November would be the next best time. But we don't know if that will prove true again in 2024. The only anomaly was 2020.
okay.
Which was an anomaly in a whole bunch of different
It
things.
was very anomalous.
The other thing that we haven't talked about is, we talked about this data, which the second one, we only have a small number of people that responded. Both times we had a majority of people voting yes, okay? We're assuming that those people, that we can sway a lot of those no voters. I don't know that. I don't know that the 100 would make them say yes rather than the 130, because there's a whole lot of those people that, if you told them you were gonna vote for $5, they're gonna say, no, I'm not giving you another dollar, you know? And the thing that I'm real concerned about is, how are we gonna get more people to vote? Because I really think that that's part of the issue too. And especially how we're gonna get more of those people who have kids at our school, or will have kids at our school in the next few years, to vote. Because I kind of think there's a whole lot of people, especially at the senior center, that no matter what, they're gonna say, I'm not gonna vote.
Yeah.
I remember from some of Ed's conversations as he was talking with some of those groups, whether it was the Eagles or the Senior Center, that we actually had some good support from the people that he talked to. And I don't know, I agree with you, Kathy, I don't know that we're gonna change many no's to yeses. But I know that some yeses will turn to no if we just completely disregard, you know, what they've been saying. If we're asking for the feedback, it doesn't do any good to ask for it if we're not going to take it under consideration and actually make some changes to what we're requesting. So just for that alone, even if we don't change any of the no's, we still need to get, we need to get our message out there that we heard you. We value what you say. This is our next best option. It's not the greatest, it's not going to serve all of our needs. But this is, you know, this is, we heard you.
I think that for the senior center, I think that actually you would get a lot of yes votes if you did a workshop on how, there's that, because
Yes.
there's very low income.
Yes.
And if somebody could put on that workshop on how to not pay the taxes, because they don't know how to do it. Because I was talking to them when I was selling the plants, and it's like, they don't know how to do it, but if somebody came in and did a workshop on how to do this, and that happened, they would, because they love kids, they would vote yes if that, you know, but they're just, financially, it's hard for them to vote yes.
Or they don't qualify. That
Yeah,
was
but
the
no,
other
we
thing.
have a lot of low-income senior citizens.
And those are things we can tackle right? When we get into the point of putting it out there again to people, and as we're starting to put out our messaging, and, you know, heck, I'll learn and I'll volunteer to go down and sit at the senior center and say, oh, bring my laptop, let's go, you know,
Yeah.
and just be able to offer opportunities like
Yeah.
that, but we still have to have,
So-
what are we going to offer? What are we going to?
I just-
Well, I was gonna say, moving forward with it, we gotta have a reduction in the 150 down, no matter
Yeah.
what. No matter
That was
what, we
number
gotta show
one.
something.
Concur, and so, curious what Mr. Soto thinks with regard to packages and thoughts and things that he's heard, and then I kind of want to restate a little bit, a couple of different ideas that I think I'm hearing, to see if we can get clarity on the next step. Got any thoughts on high school, not high school, Ptarmigan Ridge, elementary? What's it like to have an elementary on the same campus as high school? Should we do something about that? What are your thoughts?
To be honest, I'm just like listening and trying to like find out how everything works, so, and like trying to like understand too. So at the moment, nothing. But then also trying to like find out something that's gonna like blow you guys' mind.
Think
I'm-
big,
So
I
Jaden,
like
if
it.
we had to pick, if you had to pick one, what would your priority be?
Definitely option 4,
Okay.
because I feel like for people that are in PTR, like students that are in PTR, you know, they're young, so they're gonna like, they have stuff like time to go through schools and stuff. So I feel like starting young, like with new things, would be better.
Better? Would you think it would be okay not to do the CTE at the high school?
Well, that's also another thing.
That's fair.
It's hard to pick. It's hard to pick.
We know each other, so I can ask him that. It's hard.
I think it's interesting to listen to you, Jaden, that the first thing you do is think of others. And that was just right there for us all to see on, you know, you weren't thinking about, you know, what would be best for you, but best for the littler kids that still had a lot of education left to go. It's a good quality.
Couple things we could do. We certainly had conversation about how to engage. We're attending, myself and a couple of us will attend Trevor Carlson. They redid a survey across the state to look at recent feedback. If you remember when he shared with you last, their data was pre-COVID, that they shared about what resonates with its stakeholders, and last year was abysmal. So they redid surveys, and they're sharing that data at a conference on the 21st. We can look to see if he would be willing to come at the next board work session and share what current trends are and share some of the data, or worst case, I can maybe get a presentation made from him, and then I can share that with you. And then we can work from now until October to try to whittle some ideas. I hear there's gonna definitely be, I hear the general interest of reduction. How far are we reducing? I'm unclear, because I hear numbers around 130 in Y and closer to 100 in Y. And we could look to try to get a little bit tighter on some of those scenarios and bring that back to you for an October session, and/or I could hit it with a 2x2 if I know that ahead of time and start to pick your brain. But that's some of, we know not everybody gets everything, and we have to reduce. That is clear from what I hear from your feedback. How far we need to reduce, I'm not fully sure, and I'm not sure we're fully sure, and that's okay for today. We don't have to make that decision today, but we need some kind of guidance in beginning to do some estimating. If you remember, NAC's team, they're not under contract right now, so whatever scope of work we're gonna ask them to do, we have to figure what you're asking them to do and engage in a conversation of how much to re-estimate and refigure and recost. So that'll be some of what we do after tonight, but I just want to make sure I'm moving in the right direction according to your wishes. So, and maybe I'll pause there and come back to the 130, 100 million and just where are we kind of conceptually, because that'll give us an idea of where to put more of our time, because we don't want to spend the public's money unnecessarily. So, but I heard reduce. Safety, security, HVAC, gym, how much CT. I'm definitely hearing the feedback to the architect is minimize the investment in athletics activities and make sure it's instructional in nature and stick with the investment on the instructional side. So I hear that very clear, which is good feedback for Matt's team. But
same line, I think I'm of the opinion to, don't put PTR on it. And I hate doing that to our students and our staff there, but I just think for the quick look, that the majority of people will give it if they see it.
Yeah, I'm on option 3. That's where I'm at, yep.
And if we had to bump that 100 up a little bit to get the safety, security, and potentially HVAC, I'd consider that, but I'd like to keep it as close to one as.
Yeah, I kind of liked, before I kind of liked the idea of if we discover we can afford it in
Yeah.
HVAC.
Yeah,
Like, I don't know that writing on that as part of the platform is gonna help us
agreed,
a whole lot,
yeah.
but,
A big surprise at the end.
yeah.
Woohoo, look.
I'm a little bit worried when you say smaller high school edition.
Yeah, I like that.
What does that, and
Without the gym?
focused on classrooms and CTE and science, what do we get for that? Perhaps I'm curious about that. If it's like,
Does smaller just mean without the gym?
yeah,
If you
without doors and
remember,
windows.
we had a $47 million budget at the high school previously.
Yeah.
So the elementary, we're not gonna be able to drop that number much. We had 85 before, and we kind of just arbitrarily dropped it a little to 80, just kind of, but to be honest, we had, even that's difficult. So if you think of 47 million and then you subtract 100 million and subtract 85 from that, then you
That's
kind of
what-
see the percentage
Yeah.
difference there. So we had to think really hard about it. We can absolutely do something. That's still enough to do something meaningful at the high school. But it's gonna be very focused and more limited. One of the things that just sort of bounces around my head, if you remember, we did quite a bit of thinking about the high school and how to kind of master plan it to be kind of redone over 3 separate bonds, and that will adjust, right? That will adjust, and then your next bond will be different than how we had looked at it before, but that's just what it is, and
Yeah. I think that's something to, I love that we were able to communicate that vision, that phased vision, but I think that also kind of boggled people a little bit, confused them as to what they were voting for this time.
Yep.
And so maybe we just lead with the one,
right.
yeah, the simpler, the better. But I still love that vision for the high school. I want that for our kids so
Okay.
badly, so let's not lose sight of it and kind of plan with that
Mhm.
in mind. And if we have to live with poplar trees for landscaping, fine.
I don't know, I'm still a little leaning toward the 130. I don't want to go down on the CTE. I just don't want to do it. I feel like we need it. You know, the kids, we are getting more and more kids involved in CTE. And everything is changing, and we're seeing a lot more kids wanting to do apprenticeships and different things like that. And I think CTE is a key in the next 10 years. And so having a good CTE program, to me, I think the parents would want that. I think that's important to them. They love what we've already done, and they want more of it, because you know what we always hear, well, it's not always about college, and this, you know, you have to have a good CTE program if it's not all about college, or it's hard to give kids what they need. I don't know, that's just kind of,
To me, that 100 is inclusive of that.
well, see, we won't be able to get that much from it, I don't feel like.
But that original number included a big new gym and quite a bit more.
But with the 130, we'd get the regular CTE, right? The one
I
that we
think-
had.
I think
Something
that's,
you could
I think that's for
explore.
us to
That's
look at.
explore.
I think,
Okay.
I think
I
that's
think-
for you to say, CTE is our biggest priority for the high school
Right.
edition.
Yes.
We look at that,
I
and
think we're all in
previously we
agreement on
had,
Yes.
I think
we
we're
had
all
a
in
few,
agreement on
few
that.
CTE spaces, some science spaces, and then we had, the 2 gyms was the majority of that.
Yes.
Yeah,
And then
Because that wasn't even just one gym, it was both.
Right.
It was
Yeah.
both, because we were getting
Right.
rid of both, because that's what we
Yeah.
kind of had to do from a seismic upgrade perspective,
So
so.
now we have to do all of our
This is what
gym
Nack's,
activities
great
outside.
about,
Right,
they'll come
that
back,
really, that one really disturbs me, that really disturbs me. And I'm just gonna say, I don't think 100 million is like the be-all, end-all to our problems. I think 130 million ought to be our ceiling. I think 100 million ought to be our baseline. I think we're gonna have to do some juggling around. I think we're gonna have to think about long-term, like you just said, we're gonna do all the high school gyms at once, you know? So I think we have a lot of things to play around with. And I don't see how we can go without the CTE, because I looked at the numbers in the report, and we have enormous numbers of CTE classes right now. So obviously, it's popular, it's the thing I hear about.
Yep.
You know, it's well used, and, I mean, does anybody hear any complaints about the CTE classes?
Just wanting more.
Yeah, so, if we don't have any space for them, I do hear complaints about them having to make it all the way out to the portable out here for, was it sports medicine, and what's the one that's next to it? Spanish is all the way out there, oh my good, you know,
The 10-minute hike.
and talk about security measures. You think that that makes it safer having these portables and these kids all the way out here? Yeah, so. I'd say 130 is the ceiling, 100 million's the bottom, so that's me. Let's see what we can do.
Thanks, doing activism.
Yeah.
This whole-
I know you-
Because,
Tempting
you
that.
know, the context of what would pass today, theoretically, and then what does our scenario look like when these are done? And you have to think about the capacity and the needs and the constraints. And so I'm hearing, not a 5-0 consensus, but I'm hearing some ideas of where a range might be. And I think the architect has some direction about where you'd like to be. And I think we can bring, I think we're pretty clear on what the two main priorities are of what I hear, the high school CTE and then a new Ording Elementary. And I think we can work with that to bring, what does that base look like? And for a little bit more, here's what you could get. I think something else that we will know in a week or two is our preliminary assessed valuation for the aggregate of 2023, which I'm hoping by the time we have this conversation with you in October, we can bring two things. Here's the approximate price and the approximate cost to taxpayers. And then you have really good data points to see if we can't work to make a final call. I would hope that we can get closer by that October regular board meeting, because our intent would be in that newsletter to start telling some of the stories and getting out in front of the communication. And then what I think I'm hearing in that October board work session is come back to this conversation about scope and approximate cost. Some idea if we can get Trevor here or Ryan here to look at what's the current market showing and bearing and what would be the cost of these packages. And we can run a $100 million scenario and 130 million and kind of narrow. And then maybe some added conversation about engagement strategies. Okay, now that we're moving closer, because you're going to say, well, let's get feedback on the two, or we think this tells us here's the one to go and why, and we move forward with one, and then we start to engage voters and our constituents in that conversation. If I'm capturing those things right, I'm just saying that now so we have some idea of where to move forward on both of those fronts.
The other data point that we will have, I'm trying to remember correctly, so now, it's the first 4 days of school, and then isn't it October 1st that we, is the official count for, but, I'm sorry, we always refer to it as butts in the seat. The teachers, that's the way. So, the actual student count.
Also, sure.
warm body.
What? Yes.
Warm body.
Nat, if we were to pass February 2024, when do you think we're opening Ording Elementary School on the new site?
I I still use the nominal 3 years, which in this case would be 3.5, which would be the September 3 years after that, so that's 2027, right?
September 2027.
Yeah.
Your enrollment at Ptarmigan Ridge in September 2027 will be 1,100 elementary students. And I share that for you today because that's the implication of the decision that you're making now in 2024.
And what would be the number at the high school?
The high school will have
That's gonna be awful.
1182.
I'm glad you brought that up because I was gonna just pose the question. So option 4 is doing nothing at the high school.
Mhm.
And so this is sort of the counterpoint to, should that be a consideration? And you could theoretically, depending on what your final dollar number is, then that would determine how much you do at PTR, but.
I think we gotta keep the high school.
Yeah.
That's gotta go, or stay in. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, to me, the elementary school and the high school have to stay. You know, the question is if there's any, I do like the clean message of just doing the 2 schools.
I do like the wording of having a cafeteria expanded. I mean, because it's true, it is so true.
Cafeteria classroom space, because the gym is classroom space for that PE teacher. And it's a required class.
Yes.
That's the size of the gymnasium.
You could ask.
You could ask.
I didn't say else, everything's negotiable.
We're saying those things now.
Meeting you need, is that clear enough from your perspective? And do we feel like we have enough to move? And then I think from our perspective, we can create some drafts around that October newsletter, November newsletter, based on what we've heard the board talk about, start to gear up for something career tech ed, something elementary capacity. I think we have some things that we can start to get ready in anticipation. Okay, so I think we have some direction. Unless there's other topics, I just want to make sure I'm clear with where you're at before you move to reading of policies.
We're good. For now, this is obviously not the end of the conversation.
Nope.
So, thank you both again.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I feel like I'm at Christmas when I was little and told my parents, I wanted this, you know, the extra deluxe Barbie house. And they're like, oh, about
She's like, no problem, and she buys me a
Matchbox
Matchbox.
car.
And I'm like, that's not the Jeep I wanted. You know, okay, I got a Jeep. She did the same with a motorcycle. Motorcycle would be cool. Yeah, here you go.
Yeah. You kind of get to go back and go.
Yeah.
All right. Good discussion, everybody. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your thoughts and ideas, and always appreciate that. These conversations are weighty to me. All right, so we will move along to item C, which is the first reading of a whole bunch of policies. Bonnie might have been yanking our chain when she told us that she broke it up into 2 chunks.
Oh, that's the truth. I speak the truth
So
on
there's
it.
more. That's great.
Yes.
Good stuff, though. Any discussion? Questions? I sent a few that were more cosmetic. I didn't look at my email today to see if there was a response.
I have a question on that, so they bumped that, so they're saying a director could do a contract or something for 1,500 and they bumped it to 3,000. So what does that look like? What kind of so a contract or a service? But I know you can't sub, but what would be a contract or a service? I'm just curious what the difference is, because to me, subbing's a service.
I read that, but I want to look at the policy, so I'm grounded in my answer to you. Can you point to which number that was, and I'll pull that up?
1610,
Is it?
conflicts of interest.
Okay, yes.
A director or officer may enter into a contract with the district to offer goods or services if the director or officer does not receive more than $3,000. So that would be,
In
for
any
example,
calendar month.
Month, yeah.
yeah, $3,000 a month. So that means we would be buying services, maybe from Aaron if he had some side hustle.
Side hustle. What do you got going on?
What's side hustle?
The term director in this does not refer to board director, correct?
Yes.
Well, I'm surprised at that, because when Casey Nesby was a board director, she contracted her services, because she worked at the alternative high school with us, and that was what that meant at that time. So I don't know if they've changed that.
Yeah, so I would probably say similar. So she was working as a social worker.
Yes,
So if she had a skill set and was offering services to the district, that would frame that any one of you could engage in that work, but receive no more than $3,000 in remuneration for that service.
okay.
So if you were a psychologist, a nurse, or something where you were seeking that employment back, that would be the limit of what you'd be able to receive.
But
I was
agree.
interpreting this as a school employee.
No, this is related to
This
the
is related
board of
to
directors. Yeah.
But I agree with Joanne, if you're a substitute, you are giving your services to the district and you are qualified to do that, so
It's weird.
I just don't understand why the specifics of you can't substitute what you could contract your
You
services.
can contract and be with all those kids every day, and you're a school board member. It doesn't make sense, because you're actually inside the school district much more as a contracted person serving every day than you are subbing here and there. I mean, I don't understand the whole sub thing anyway, but this doesn't make that much sense to me. I feel like,
It's a good question.
I'm sure in the era of hard to find goods and services, particularly for smaller systems, people wear multiple hats, and probably a way to get some people working.
But in smaller districts, they do have directors that
Yes.
sub,
we do.
because I spoke to several people.
I think this is in districts over so many kids.
Over 2,000.
Is it because it'd be, as a substitute, you're included in the union that we bargained for? That we bargained labor agreements
But
for?
it says you did, even like if you had a husband that worked in the school as a teacher, you would just have to excuse yourself if it had anything to do with that, like something to do with
And,
it.
and as a substitute, you don't get to vote on the
Probably not in a
CBA.
cert contract.
Right.
Okay.
We would like this sent to OSPI and ask them why. Why we can't sub if we could contract.
Yeah, that would be, I don't know. I'll say my hypothesis. I hope I answered your question, I think,
Yeah, I mean,
as a for instance.
You just don't agree with it.
I don't agree with it, but it's okay. I just feel, it's just frustrating because they need subs so badly, and we're right here, and we can't do it.
Can we send that one to WASDA?
Well, I feel like there's, this is just my opinion only, but I feel like there's a little bit of a fine line, and one of the things coming on as a board director of a school district of any size, but especially one where the community is kind of closely knit, and you have a lot of interactions with everybody, that when you have those relationships with the people that you work with, whether you're substituting, it kind of puts you in, and I'm going to phrase this in the only way I know how, but kind of in an unfair advantage to your peers and the people that you get along with, and maybe even negatively towards you. For instance, if I had a niece that wanted to come and work here, she wanted to use my name as a reference, and I told her that, I mean, you could, but it could work against you. Because some people might feel like that's an unfair advantage for her, that she's got the board director in her family. And the other thing is that some people feel like if they just know you well enough, you can facilitate changes on the board and for the school district, because, hey, she's my friend.
Yeah.
And so I just feel like there's some muddy waters there that would really take HR and personnel some pretty big employee handbooks to kind of address. Those would be my concerns from the outside looking in, is that there would be an ability for some people to try to affect change at the board level because you guys are down there in the trenches with them, because you have that relationship, whereas others do not.
I guess maybe that would be true if we hadn't already worked here for 20-some years and know everyone anyway.
Right, and obviously, I mean, because you have people that go to you and ask you things, and same with
Yeah.
Kathy, you know. You guys get asked and talked to about different things than I do, very much so. But it's unfair of people who were your friends because you worked with them for 25 years to expect that if they say something to you, that you can just take it to the board and facilitate a change, because that's not how this works. And that mostly those things that they want facilitated change in is completely out of our purview, because we're policy and procedure, we're not operations and changing and doing that kind of stuff. That's just my 2 cents in kind of how I understand how this works, but I get what you're saying.
Well, we can't anyway, so.
I just keep reading spouse,
I know.
spouse,
Yeah.
and I'm like,
All right, that's-
that is probably not good in my world.
She was
Yeah.
already not here when we.
She was here before I was.
Yeah.
It used to be that people would have to quit their jobs if their husband or wife.
They did, they used to.
Yeah, and Sandy Strasburg got a job. When Dawn got on the school board, she had to quit her job. Yeah.
If I told her she had to go home and just not work, she'd be thrilled, but.
No arguments. Yeah. I was just suggesting Wazda may be able to share some insight, kind of what's the history on that, if you wanted to ask them. The couple comments I had, there was reference to forms that lived on our website or were accessible to the community on our website, and I couldn't find them. There was one for now I don't remember which ones they were.
The high school graduation certificate.
Yes,
You
yes,
didn't
when
tell
we
us about.
withheld diplomas and that kind of stuff, so they weren't major things. Was there any other discussion on any of the other policies? Okay. So Joanne, if you do want to do some research
Oh, no,
around that one.
I know
as a
I can't do
follow-up.
it. I just thought,
Okay.
that's frustrating to me.
Yeah, it is
Because
kind of,
I don't like that.
Especially when you could do it,
I
right?
know.
okay. All right, then we'll go ahead. I believe I need no action on this, but they will continue on to
Second read?
second read. All right, we'll move on to board comments.
I just
Oh.
want, I just was gonna, I wanted to thank you for the format tonight.
Yeah.
It was really nice to be able to actually really have those conversations and kind of bounce things off of one another, and to have Liz and Matt here for those two. I know that we don't all agree the exact same way, and I find that fascinating, because I love to hear the reasons, you know, why, because, I mean, you guys are thinking of something that I might not, for instance, but I love the format. And then to that end, I know you kept mentioning the October board meeting is when we'll have another one of these. I'm gonna be out of town, and we'll have to take my laptop, I guess, so that I can attend remotely, if that's going to be possible.
We'll make it possible.
I had a question last night, and I didn't know the answer to it. I was just going to ask if maybe one of you did. Who decides how many Friday night games each district gets?
That's gonna be probably the
Holly?
league athletic director that's in charge of scheduling and working with others in conjunction with the officials association.
Okay, so they do that like at their meeting there?
Each athletic director or a couple of them pair up to work on each respective sport, so they all aren't doing everything. And that person is in charge of putting together the entirety of the league schedule, and they're looking at where officials go and how to arrange that.
Okay.
So that would be my presumption. Marty, for instance, was in charge of wrestling brackets and other things, so that's how I know that it's somebody within that broader unit that
Okay.
takes that and puts that together for the entirety of the league. They split it.
They just wanted to make sure that we were getting as many as everyone else Friday nights. They
Nobody
hate
likes
when I-
Thursday
They
night
hate
lights.
it. They absolutely hate it. It's so sad that we have to do
Well, welcome to the world of girls soccer and
Yeah.
fast pitch.
it. I know,
Yeah.
that's true.
More questions? I had a couple things. Melissa will be representing us at the WASDA's General Assembly where they will talk about our legislative positions. And we're gonna be offline, and we were wondering if you've got a window of time either tomorrow or next Friday.
We make windows.
Oh, we'd like to go over them with you. I
know
learned a
someone
lot.
that's really good at scheduling.
So Melissa and I are available both of those days, so whatever works best. We just want to make sure that we understand the implications of those positions for our district and our students and staff and everybody.
In person or electronic?
I think we could do it virtually.
Virtual?
Yeah. There's an ungodly amount of positions, so you're all privy to that information. It's not anything, we're just not gonna have a big public meeting to discuss them. But we'll let you know where we land on all of those decisions.
I saw that earlier, and it's like,
Wow.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah,
It's
yeah,
a
I
lot.
started doing my
Oh,
own,
goodness.
I know. And these are just the new ones, I didn't even go over the amendments, but I did try to reduce the amount of these reads, knowing that there's some amended wording in here. Bonnie said, not a good idea.
Good thought.
And so that's happening, and I'm also intrigued by the mini cows. I have
I know, I love
talked
Intrigued by
about
what?
the mini cows that we are
Oh, yeah.
the proud owners of, which I'm super excited for our kids, and I know that's gonna be a great learning opportunity. I can't wait to learn
Did you
more
hear
about
about
them. And I can't wait to see them. Maybe they can visit us at a meeting like the lambs, but anyway, I'm super excited they won't be eaten. And, anyways, I'm grateful for the donation and
yeah, sounds
Absolutely.
wonderful.
can't wait to learn more about them. I can't wait for our FFA program. And it's not, I was like, are we the only district to own animals? And the answer is no. Other
Oh,
FFA
no,
programs
yeah.
have owned animals and
Yeah.
had barns and managed their own stock. So I did my research and,
My cousin
Anyways.
is a principal at Sun Valley, and
Oh,
I know
good.
they just had an auction with their animals, and one of the girls didn't realize that they got sold and they were gonna get butchered. And she said she had a major meltdown at the auction, it was awful. It was
Yeah.
like-
I have to tell
Something you might want to tell the kids people.
Mark and I went to the auction at the fair for our FFA kids this past year, and there was a handful of kids where it was just brutal for them to get their pets auctioned off. And we got a pig and it was fantastic. And I understand this year, it is fantastic. It was a girl, her name's Bake-Ann. But I think our kids are all doing pigs this year, so they're not gonna do lambs, they're all doing pigs.
I believe all pigs.
So I'm really excited for our FFA group.
We believe many of those will be raised on the property we just purchased. Not all, some have their own space, but
Yeah,
several.
that'll be cool. I can't wait. We're gonna buy another one. It's worked out good.
Oh, good.
So,
Tax-free?
Yeah, yeah, it's nice, except for the butchering.
Except for
It's
the
not
butchering.
tax-free.
Yeah.
Anyway, any other board comments, thoughts? Sweet, then I will adjourn this meeting tonight at 7:54 PM.